Brendan Reesor, hello.
Hi, Emily.
So you sent me your book, Beyond the Pale, Anemia, the Visible Yet Unseen Cause of Mental Illness, and this is what shocked me the most, gender dysphoria. And I was like, no way. And then I start reading it, and it isn't just like some random guy's opinion. Look at this crap. It's like a freaking scientific journal article with like references and stuff. And you go into the science and you officially broke my brain. So please educate my audience about the connections that you found with your personal experience and your observation between mental illness and physical illness.
Yeah, so before we kind of talk about why I think that gender dysphoria is mainly caused by anemia, um, it's best to kind of explain to people just how important physical health is for mental health, because we tend to think of it in terms of how the outer world affects us, how the stresses of our everyday lives, relationships, things like that can affect us. But we don't tend to think about how our inner world can affect us, so how our physiology affects our mental state, right?
So true.
Um, and to best exemplify this, I kind of start the book off with a dream that I once had that really changed how I see things. So when you're dreaming, it's kind of obvious how the body is affecting the mind, because you're completely cut off from the outside world. There's nothing else. The outer world isn't affecting you. It's just the inner world that can possibly be affecting your mind, right? So I was having this dream and I came into consciousness. The first thing I remember was lying at the bottom of a deep pool. So I'm on my back, I'm looking up, I'm deep underwater, and of course I'm panicking, right? I'm terrified because I feel like I'm drowning in this pool. And for some reason, I don't know why, I felt like I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. And so I was just stuck there. Felt like I was chained to the bottom of this pool and I just couldn't move. And then I woke up and I go, and I take a big, desperate gasp of air, like I hadn't been breathing. And I'm awake and I realize, oh, okay, it was just a dream, right? And what most people would think in that case is that they would think, oh, that's so cool. My mind is so powerful. My dream was so realistic that somehow my dream actually tricked my body into holding its breath, right? They would think that as kind of top down.
Yeah.
But what I realized was that it's the exact opposite. So I
Mm.
was lying on my back. I don't usually sleep on my back, but sometimes you end up on your back. And when you're lying on your back, you're very prone to sleep apnea. So your kind of throat relaxes and you stop breathing, right? And so you're suffocating, right? And so what happened was I was lying on my back. I had stopped breathing. I was suffocating. And this suffocation, this stress of suffocating was kind of what woke me up. But also before that, in the dream, that was what caused me to dream of being at the bottom of a pool. So my mind, sitting within my body, was trying to make sense of everything. It was trying to create a narrative to explain what was going on. So it was thinking, okay, so we're paralyzed because while you're dreaming, you're under muscle atonia so that you don't flail around, right? I'm paralyzed. I'm suffocating. I can't breathe for some reason, and I'm panicking. Oh, I know. I must be at the bottom of a pool, right? It kind of comes up with this like story to tell us. And the stories, they usually don't really make sense, but they kind of explain how we're feeling, right? If you just told somebody what happened in your dream as just like an order of this happened, then this happened, then this happened, it makes no sense. But when you talk about like the visceral feelings of like how you felt during the dream, we understand what the dream was like, right? Um, so the in this case, the dream was caused by my physiology. The mental experience that I was having was like it's just a reflection of what was going on in my body. And I can give like many different examples. And one like kind of funny one is with men, we have sexual dreams, and then we wake up and there's a big mess in our pants, and people think that I had the sexual dream, and because I had the sexual dream, that caused me to have the orgasm.
Hmm.
But it's the exact opposite. Your body is just doing its thing. It has the orgasm, and that causes you to have sexual thoughts. And you might argue that it's no, it can't possibly be that way. But think about it this way: if when you're a child, male or female, you're never thinking about sex, right? Because your sex hormones are just like very low, and you don't think about sex. It's just never on your mind. But then you become a teenager, and yeah, you see sex on in the media and stuff, but you start to think about it all the time and all the time. And the only difference is that your sex hormones have greatly increased, right?
Yes.
It's not that your sex hormones increase because you've been thinking about sex a lot because now you're a teenager and you watch R-rated movies. It's that you is that your body is changing, your physiology is changing, and that's changing your mental state, what you think about all the time, right? Somebody with a poor libido, it's their problem is that they don't think about sex enough. You just need to think about sex more. They're not thinking about sex often because they have a poor libido, because their physiology is in some way depressed, right? Um, and I can give other examples with shame and stuff, but that's a bit more complicated. But basically, like it sounds mind-boggling, but you don't blush because you feel shame and embarrassment. You feel shame and embarrassment because you blush.
Wow.
So part of your body realizes that everybody's looking at me and they're judging me, and so I better improve my appearance. And so what your body does is it blushes, it becomes nice and red, rosy cheeks, and that makes you look good because it's like, oh, look at how healthy and fertile they are, right? And so it makes you look good, and that kind of wins you favor. Uh, but the actual act of or the physiological experience of blood rushing from the brain and other places to the face makes you self-conscious because you feel all the heat in your face. And then people often feel very confused when they blush, and
Mm.
they stammer and but they're confused because that blood that's in their face is not in their brain, and they can't think properly. They
Ooh.
can't think because the blood's in their brain. Just like when you get heat stroke, your body flushes, right? And you have all your blood to the periphery to try and get rid of that heat. And when you have heat stroke, you can't think at all, right?
Not at all. And it is kind of like whenever I read this in the book, I was just like mind blown. Like I never thought about those correlations of, which came first, the chicken or the egg. And whenever you laid it all out, it was just like, oh, duh. Like that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. So what are some of the other correlations that you got?
Um, well, I started to notice a pattern. Um, so, well, maybe I should talk about how how I first saw this pattern,
Yes.
and
Yeah, because
I
I think that's what I love about interviews is that I want to hear like I love the brilliance. I love all of the science. I love all of the uh knowledge and information that you have in this, but I love that it started with a personal experience.
hmm Yeah, so I can tell you a bit about how I first saw the pattern was I saw it in myself. So after university, I suppose my health was kind of bad, and my mental health was always just like okay to bad throughout my upbringing, I guess. So
And what
what
was
I
it like depression or
no,
like
it was like anxiety. I was a pretty anxious kid, which is it's like it's common, but uh, and I also kind of experienced like it's very mild, but I also felt gender dysphoria just like a little bit. And I can't say that, I really thought I was a girl or something, like a lot of people feel. So it wasn't as severe. But I did like feel dysphoria about my gender, and I was anxious. And I was also, this might seem completely unrelated, but I was like also like more of a social justice warrior type person.
mm-hmm.
So I mean, it kind of like went with my anxiety. I felt like the world was like this awful place, and like the world's on fire because of climate change and stuff. And it's not like these things, they don't matter, right? But it was more a reflection of like my health and my mental health and my physiology, really. But Anyway, what happened? It's a long story, but I ended up just eating a lot more red meat. So
Hmm.
I was eating just copious amounts of red meat, as you do, um, and uh, and it was funny because like I noticed some physical changes, like my skin became more smooth, and over time I became less and less pale as well. And but it wasn't just physical change. Like I was hoping to improve my physical health. That's why I changed my diet, and it did. But also my anxiety went away, and then also the mild feelings of gender dysphoria also went away.
That's crazy.
And then crazier, I also like my outlook on life changed. Like I wasn't a social justice warrior type person anymore. It just felt much more calm and confident and relaxed. And it's like the world isn't such a bad place. And I was able to change some of my views on like, not like it matters, but like on political things. And it's not that somebody like gave me a convincing argument to
Mm-mm.
change my mind. I changed, and so the way that I saw the world changed. The world didn't change, I changed. And so like how I felt about the world changed for me,
It was
right?
intrinsic.
Yeah, it's completely intrinsic. Yeah. And so that's how I first noticed this pattern. And then I started to it was during COVID lockdowns. And I basically sad and lonely because can't go out and do anything. So I joined Tinder and Bumble and Hinge and that stuff. And I was on the dating apps. And I started to notice it was very obvious because people list if they're transgender or non-binary or pansexual, anything, right? They always list it on there, and I noticed that they were always like I was quite pale, and they often listed that they have a mental health issue, um, and they just I could tell like they not to be rude, but they didn't look healthy.
Mm.
And the paleness was the biggest thing. I could really tell that, and I think I could only tell because I noticed that in myself first. And I noticed just in my general life that anybody I knew who didn't eat red meat or was vegan or vegetarian, they also tended to be more pale. Anybody I knew who had like a depression or anxiety diagnosis was also very pale. And so I started to notice these things, and the trouble was at first I didn't have any conceptualization of this anemic pallor. I just saw it as pale. I didn't like so there's a difference I should explain
Yeah.
between anemic pallor and a paleness from a lack of sunshine. So if you don't get enough sunshine, you might not produce as much melanin in your skin, and that gives it a bit of a tan brownish color. But you can also be pale from a lack of blood underneath the skin. So the our skin is quite translucent, meaning you can partially see through it, and so the blood underneath the skin gives a bit of an indicator of the health status, right? And so if you really don't, and you can even just see it if you just like push the blood away in your hand, you can see it go pale, right? Because the blood's no longer there.
Mm.
And so uh, it's really interesting. I read this book by Mark Changizi called The Vision Revolution, and he talks about why humans can see the red-green color spectrum. So most mammals, like your dog and cat, for example, they can't see red-green. They can only see two dimensions of color. They can see the blue-yellow dimension of color and the white-black. So they're not working with as much, but we can see those two dimensions and a third dimension of red-green, right? And
Mm.
it's only as far as mammals go, birds can see like three or even more, and some like other like cuttlefish can see like nine dimensions somehow. But but humans and a few other primates can see three dimensions of color, whereas all other mammals can only see two. And people think that, oh, maybe it's so that we can see like berries when they're ripe and stuff, but it's not because there are plenty of animals that eat those foods that don't have the color receptor. And anyway, all the primates that do see red green, they have skin showing. All the primates
Mm.
that don't, they're completely covered in hair, right? And so you have to ask because being naked without hair, it's not nothing. It's a big cost, right? I'd much rather be cozy and covered in hair and regulate my body temperature better
Me
that way, right?
too.
But so it's a big cost. So like, what is the benefit of it? And what he realized, Changizi, is that we have this ability to see the color red, so that we can perceive how much blood is underneath other people's skin and how well oxygenated that blood is. So basically, the more oxygenated blood is, the more red it appears. The more deoxygenated it is, the more green it appears. And then the more blood there is, the more blue it appears. And the less blood there is, the more yellow it appears. So that's why your veins, there's plenty of blood in there, but it's kind of deoxygenated. Your veins look blue, right? If your feet have poor circulation, they might be a little bit purple because they're slightly deoxygenated, but there's lots of blood there, right? But if somebody is a yellow-bellied coward, that means that their belly is literally yellow because they're just lacking blood, and you need blood to act courageously, right? And so without that blood, you're a coward. You're yellow bellied, right? And so that's where these terms come from, and I give a whole bunch in the book. But if you're feeling blue, that means your blood flow is languid, and so you're depressed, right? Um, but yeah, so we don't just see. So I kind of went at it backwards. I'm explaining like the physiology of it, but like we see blood for two reasons: to see emotional expressions, right? If I blush or if I'm angry and I'm like my face is turning purple because I'm so angry, or if I'm shocked all of a sudden and my face goes pale, right? Because my blood is going to all my muscles so I can get ready to run away, right? So we see blood for two reasons: for emotions and to perceive the health status of other people, right? But what I argue and point out in the introduction of my book is that they're not two things, they're the same thing,
Mm,
right? So it is our physiology and our physical health that determines our emotional state, right? And as I've kind of already explained, so it's not two things, it's one. So anyway, it took me a really long time to realize that the paleness I was seeing wasn't just a lack of sunshine, because you could make that argument, right? Like sunshine is important for health, so maybe they just don't get outside as much, right?
yeah,
But that's not the case. It's a specifically a paleness from a lack of blood um, underneath the skin.
that's amazing. And then, so, you go on. There's even a chapter on mania.
Hmm.
And so I haven't read that chapter yet, but you really go. What I love about what you did was that you took your theory and your experience, but then you went and found other people who corroborated that.
Hmm. Yeah, so I started to notice that um, when I was first trying to figure out, like with myself, I was like, okay, I used to be anxious, and then my physical health improved, so and then I was less anxious. So I started to like try and conceptualize that, and I started to realize that it's not just the outer world that's affecting my mental state, but also the inner world. And so, what could that be that's in my inner world causing anxiety? And so I started to think about okay, well, if you're constantly getting signals, almost every second of the day that something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong from your physiology, then that might kind of bubble up into your more conscious mind to the point where you just like you feel and think so strongly that something's wrong. And so you become very anxious, right? And I would think about it. I would be like, well, what sort of signals would these, things are bad signals be? And, you can think of like high blood pressure or cortisol or something of that nature. But it hit me one day when I was reading an article about high altitude and mental illnesses. It hit me one day what the ultimate things are bad signal is. And the ultimate things are bad signal is that you're suffocating. There's nothing more important for your brain and body than oxygen. And the worst thing that could possibly happen to any multicellular creature, it's a very ancient and deep mechanism, is we need to know when we're suffocating. And you can be suffocating for a number of reasons. You can be suffocating because something is literally strangling you, like a snake. You could be suffocating because you've dove too deep into the water and you got to get back up to the surface, right? So it's best to panic and get up there. You could be maybe you ventured too deep into a cave or something, or whatever, right? You need a constant reminder to keep on breathing and to make sure that you're not suffocating. And so I realized, like, oh, like the thing that is most important is oxygen. And it opened up a whole world of a way to see things in terms of mental illness. Because like we talk about mental illness all the time, and there are so many people in this space talking about mental illness, and they might talk about, well, it's all because of like childhood trauma, or it's because of I'm blanking on stuff, but like this and that, and people talk about it all the time. And
Relational
you know
trauma, like I
yeah.
was married to a narcissist, or like suicidal ideation. Like there's so many different things that people point that to point the finger at that and say
Mhm.
that is the cause of mental illness.
Thank you. Yeah, and there's so many things, and like even in our space where people are talking about physical causes, they might talk about mitochondrial dysfunction, for example, right? And well, what do mitochondria need more than anything to function? The answer is oxygen. Yeah,
Oxygen.
they need oxygen more than anything to function. And so, could it be that, there's nothing wrong with the person? There's nothing wrong even with the mitochondria. They're just not getting enough of what they need. Um, uh, and I mean, it like people like when I say, like, I don't think we realize how important oxygen is. People will be like, well, of course we know how important oxygen is, right? Like, duh, like it's obviously important. But like, how many people do you know who have a mental illness, who their doctor, psychiatrist, or whatever, or research scientists are focusing on getting these people to get more oxygen to their brain? Right? You don't know anybody, but you know plenty of people who are told to take medications or to take therapy, right? We know the importance of medications and therapy, and I'm not saying that they're not important, but we don't, to say that we know that oxygen is important for the brain and for mental health is it's just a lie. It's not backed up by our actions. We don't know the importance of oxygen for our brain and for our body. We don't practically know it, right? You might be able to say that oxygen is important for the brain because like you've been taught that, but you don't actually understand it, right? And so perhaps it's a good time to say this now, is that uh, the whole body needs oxygen, right? Every tissue in your body benefits when you can get more oxygen and consume more oxygen. But it happens that the brain is particularly sensitive to hypoxia or a lack of oxygen. So, and that's because basically neurons are purely aerobic. So many cell types in your body, such as your skin cells or your gut cells, they can go without oxygen, and they're metabolically flexible. They can use anaerobic metabolism, right? But there are certain cells in your body, such as neurons and like cardiac muscle cells, that cannot use anaerobic metabolism and can only function with oxygen and lots of it. And that is why if somebody is like dead and they need to resuscitate them, the reason why they need to keep them breathing and keep giving them oxygen is because the brain will die first, right? And
Mm.
and the brain will die quickest without oxygen. It's the most sensitive to hypoxia. Um, that's basically what you need to understand. And the neurons in your cells, there's some other patterns with it. The neurons, they're with you for life. So the neurons that you're born with, for the most part, those are all the neurons that you'll have until you die.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, they're the exact same neurons. I do believe you grow some new ones. I mean, I suppose you have to as your brain gets bigger as you grow. Um, and uh, and they can do that. They can be so long lived because they have this kind of cleaner metabolism to burn just oxygen, right? but the your skin cells or your gut cells, right? These cell types that are more metabolically flexible and use more anaerobic metabolism, they're much shorter lived, right? Your skin cells don't last as long. And so like we can only have these incredibly energy demanding neurons by having lots of oxygen,
Hmm.
right? And uh, like before there was oxygen on the earth, right? You couldn't have multicellular animals, right? Just because they couldn't they like in order to support this much tissue, like you need a lot of oxygen, you need a lot of energy, right?
Yeah, and you go into even a little bit about like the hyperbaric oxygen chamber, and and I would even think like just like taking oxygen would like be enough, but there's something different that happens, I think, whenever you get that iron and you address that anemia.
Yeah, so people can uh, in my chapter on hyperbaric oxygen therapy, I go over like a pretty extraordinary case. So there's one study on people with depression, and they have basically they like try some of them with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, some of them with hyperbaric oxygen therapy and a drug for like an antidepressant, and then some people with just the antidepressant, and then of course a control group. And the group with hyperbaric oxygen therapy and hyperbaric oxygen therapy plus drug did the best. So like that's one interesting study, but there's not a whole lot of science on it yet. Probably because there's not a whole lot of profit involved with it yet. Whereas for like drugs, like they can make a lot of profit on it. But it does look like there's more coming out. And then there's this one case where this gentleman, he had, I believe it was some sort of neurological condition like MS, and he was also very depressed. He was, I think, suicidal even, and he was very anxious. And he was only sleeping about 2 to 3 hours a night. And he goes to the doctors, and he doesn't want to take the pharmaceutical route. He's kind of like more holistic about that, and I respect that. And he didn't want to take pharmaceuticals, right? And so, like, it's kind of funny. Like, they didn't have any way of treating him. They just send him back on his way. Like, okay, well, you're not going to take what we offer you, so like we can't treat you. And then he comes back a year later, and they finally agree. Okay, we'll do something about it, and they give him hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Uh, and within like 4 to 5 days, he's not sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night. He's sleeping 4 to 5 hours a night.
Wow.
And then within a couple weeks, he's sleeping 9 to 10 hours a night. And I forget which one it was, but it's some sort of neurological condition such as MS that went away. His depression went away. He wasn't suicidal. His anxiety went away, and he was sleeping so well. And a lot of people, when they hear, okay, a man, he's not sleeping well, his mental and physical health is poor. Oh, obviously he's not sleeping well, so he should just sleep more, right? But it's like, why isn't he sleeping well? Like, it's not like he's like sleeping with all the lights on and he's got a stereo blasting by his ear, right? It's not like his sleep hygiene is just like so poor. Like that can be important, but it's not the only thing. Like there's a reason why he's not sleeping well. And that's because he's constantly feels like he's suffocating because for whatever reason, I don't know, for whatever reason, this gentleman wasn't getting enough oxygen. And you need to get lots of oxygen to get deep restorative sleep. And so if you're not and you're not breathing well, if you have a respiratory disorder, if you have sleep apnea, if you have anemia, you're not going to be getting that deep restorative sleep because you're not getting enough oxygen for your body to do the restoration, right? And you're when you're suffocating and when your body's not getting enough oxygen, it gets stressed, and so you just can't relax, and so you're constantly getting woken up by this. I call it like the suffocation alarm, right? So uh, yeah, like the one thing I would say, like, and you kind of alluded to this, there's a bit of a difference with like, you might think, oh well, I'll just wear an oxygen mask or I'll do hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and that'll solve my problem, right? I think it's very powerful for like a scientific experiment in the short term, but we don't know about the long term if it's feasible. It's also very expensive, but even if it's feasible, um, your body kind of adjusts and finds like a new homeostasis. So like what I would be concerned about is that he would just stop making as much hemoglobin, uh, and he wouldn't make enough red blood cells to support oxygen delivery, and that's kind of the root of the problem. So at least putting respiratory disorders aside, that could be a problem. But the big problem that I'm addressing with my book is anemia, and that just simply means a lack of blood, not enough red blood cells. And people might wonder why somebody doesn't have enough blood, why they're not making enough red blood cells. And it's a good question, but it's very understandable once you understand like the biology of it. It's
Okay.
very, very difficult to make enough red blood cells. So you have about 30 trillion red blood cells in your body right now, and that makes up 80% of all your cells by number. So four out of every, if I counted all of your cells, I would count four red blood cells for every one other cell,
Okay.
right? So they're very small, but uh, uh, but it takes an incredible amount of cellular division, right? Which takes certain nutrients like B12 and folate. It takes up a lot of those nutrients, right? So in your bone marrow, that's where you're kind of dividing these red blood cells. So it takes a lot of nutrition, and then every single red blood cell has 200 to 300 million hemoglobin molecules in it, and each hemoglobin molecule has an iron atom, four iron atoms in it, and so you need a lot of iron as well. Iron is like the typical rate limiting factor for most people. They're not getting enough iron. It's the most common cause of anemia, iron deficiency. It's also the most common nutrient deficiency in the world. Iron deficiency is. It's like I think it's about like a third of all women in the world, developing or developed countries, are iron deficient. Um, and so anemia, it is in fact a very common and not just, we tend to think of as common problems as like, well, it's a mild problem. It can be mild, but if you're not getting enough oxygen, like it doesn't matter. Like it can be very severe. It's a very big problem to not be getting enough oxygen to your tissues, right? So that's how you deliver oxygen. You breathe in the air, your red blood cells pick it up at the lungs, and then they bring it to the tissues that need the oxygen, right? And so your brain being first and foremost the biggest consumer of oxygen needs it the most, right? But all your tissues need it. And so if you don't have enough blood, you won't get enough oxygen, your body will suffer, your tissues won't perform as well.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it baffles me because there's this absolute agenda for us to not eat meat,
Yeah.
and to be vegan.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I think it's one of the worst things that somebody can do for their health. It's unfortunately typically it's more common in women too, which like they're already at such a disadvantage for so I can explain that in women anemia is far more common than it is in men. And there are, I can attribute like four main reasons for that. One being menstruation, you're losing blood every month. Two being testosterone actually improves red blood cell production, erythropoiesis. Three is that women actually just prefer to eat less meat. They tend to. I think maybe there's like a cultural reason for that. Like red meat is seen as this like manly thing, and
Hmm.
it's not as feminine, which is unfortunate because women just biologically speaking, like they need it more. And then the fourth is childbirth, right? Women can lose a lot of blood with
Yeah.
childbirth. Uh, and so it's just like the cards are stacked against you. And then it's even more particularly common in teenage females because they're growing so rapidly. So their nutritional demands are so high and they just can't get enough. And that is the exact age where they're most vulnerable to this propaganda that red meat's bad for you, it's bad for the planet, and if you want to be a good person, then you shouldn't eat red meat. And it's just it's like it's tragic and it makes me sick.
Absolutely. And, I mean, I was 12 years old when I had my period and I bled out.
Hmm.
There was something wrong. And then once I went to the doctor, they were like, oh, she's anemic. And then I had to start taking these little like iron pills. Like nobody, it was never on somebody's radar that like, hey, we need to increase the red meat for this girl.
Yeah, yeah, they're very reductionist like that. You're lacking iron, so take
Take a
iron
pill.
exactly. And I don't know. I haven't personally ever taken iron, and I've heard some good things about it. But I also know a lot of people who take lots of iron as supplementally, and they never get better.
No.
And I mean, they're eating a vegan diet. And the other thing about vegan diets or just plant heavy diets is that a lot of plants actually inhibit the digestive system's ability to absorb iron. So there are things
Wow.
like phytates and uh, tannins, and like I think soy is another one that they inhibit iron absorption in the gut. And so even if you're eating these things like spinach, right, that are supposedly high in iron, they're high in non-heme iron, and it's just like don't eat spinach. Just eat some steak, please. If you want to actually improve your health and improve your body's ability to produce red blood cells, like you really need to eat and focus on red meat. If for whatever reason, perhaps religious reasons, you can't eat red meat, dark meat chicken, salmon, uh, emu, as I know you've had experience with recently, and stuff like that. Like
Ostrich.
yeah, the darker
Yeah,
the darker the meat, the more iron typically is in it.
absolutely. So, Brendan, what possessed you? Okay, so you had this experience, you had this understanding, and then you kind of went down the rabbit hole for yourself. What possessed you to do this for everybody else? What possessed you to write this book?
Yeah, like honestly, I felt just convicted for years about it because like I would listen to podcasts about people who are much more intelligent and expert on subjects than I am, and psychiatrists and psychologists and doctors talking about mental illness without seeing this angle, and it just like it to this day it weirds me out, and I'm just like yelling on my phone, just like you don't get it, like what do you like, just like they don't see the pattern that's kind of right in front of us all. And I have to remind myself sometimes that for the longest time, I didn't see it too. For years, I couldn't understand the difference between the two types of paleness, and it takes a while for if people are listening, they might not even like if you just look with your eyes from now on, and if you have like people with gender dysphoria, for example, or people who are vegan or people with different mental illnesses, you'll start to notice it, and you'll start to see it, and you'll see it more in women than in men. But you can really see it, and it's something that you don't need to. I mean, you can just see it with your eyes as long as you're not colorblind. Um, so
Yeah,
it's
I thought
there,
that was
but
so funny when you were talking about doctors. They
yeah,
were thinking about screening doctors like they do pilots, that
yeah.
if you're colorblind, you can't be a doctor because you can't see the subtle changes underneath the skin of the color.
Yeah, and in the past, some universities or groups used to not admit colorblind. It's pretty much always men who are colorblind, but they wouldn't admit those colorblind doctors because. And I give an example in the book, like the doctor, like his patient is like clearly like faint and like just like totally pale and needs a blood transfusion, and the doctor can't see it, and the nurse is like, what are you doing? Like she needs blood, like. Um, but like, yeah, we don't like. I think it's just such a deep perception, and it's not tied with our kind of like more cerebral conscious mind that we just kind of take it for granted, and we all see it, right? Like we can all tell when somebody's blushing, but you might not know why you can tell, and you might not realize that it's because you can see the change in the color of the skin, and it's because of the blood. For example, like they've done studies where like they show faces to people like for like 3 to 5 seconds, and they have to pick which one they think is healthier.
Ah,
And people will pick the one the they'll associate pale lips and pale skin and dark under eyes with illness, right? And it makes sense why we're good at this, right? You want to identify who is sick and who is healthy very quickly, and people can do it within those 3 to 5 seconds, even though if you ask them afterwards, like what did you see? Why did you pick this one over that one? They can't tell you. They're not like, well, their lips were pale. Like they don't know why exactly. It's not conscious, right? It's just kind of they see it. But yeah, I felt terrible because like nobody's talking about like the obvious that like our brains need oxygen. They need oxygen more than anything. And like with gender dysphoria, it's such a controversial topic, and I was so like hesitant about talking about it for that reason. Um, because like it's just so politicized, and people on the left basically they say there's nothing wrong with it's just them being themselves, and if only people would stop discriminating against them, then their health would be fine, their mental health would be fine. And then people on the right, they'll say it's just like a social contagion caused by TikTok and gender ideology. And like I hope that if people read this book, they can kind of dissolve that false binary and realize that like it doesn't have to be one or the other of those things, and that they're both just wrong. Like it's not just those things. Like so like I have a chapter in the book specifically on studies that talk about or that examine rates of different illnesses in people with gender dysphoria. So I would actually like to, because I like to be accurate with these things. So I would like to kind of just like go by the numbers. So this
Yeah.
study compared mental health of transgender and gender nonconforming youth compared with their peers. That's the title. And basically what that means is that they looked at 100 or 1,333 gender dysphoric subjects aged 3 to 17, and they compared those so that each kid, let's say you have like a 12-year-old female, they would compare it to 10 12-year-old females without gender dysphoria and 10 12-year-old males without gender dysphoria, right? So for every single one child with gender dysphoria, they compared it to 20 non-gender dysphoric children. And I'll just summarize here, like all of the rates were similar to this, but my book kind of focuses more on, I guess, the teenagers than the children. So uh, this is just talking about the prevalence in transgender females compared to uh, or sorry, transgender. It's confusing because
I
they use
know
that.
it
So
does. And you're
so
like, they were
yeah,
born this, and then
yeah,
what are they really, and what are you supposed to call them?
yeah,
And it gets confusing.
yeah. In my book, I just stick to biological sex. So so uh, so this is comparing females who have gender dysphoria, so they would feel like a male or non-binary
Okay.
perhaps. Females with gender dysphoria compared to females of the same age without gender dysphoria. These are
Okay.
these are what the comparisons are. So in terms of looking at, this is just mental illnesses. 74.5% of them had a diagnosed mental illness, right? So that's fully like diagnosed by a doctor, right? So that's an incredibly high rate, and that made them 3.7 times more likely compared to their peers, right?
Wow.
38.9% of them had an anxiety disorder. That made them 4 times more likely than their peers to have an anxiety disorder. Attention deficit disorder, 3.3 times more likely. Autism spectrum disorder, 7.6 times more likely. Bipolar disorder, they were 8 times more likely than their peers to have bipolar. Conduct and or disruptive disorders, 4.5 times more likely. Depressive disorders, 61.5% of them had a depressive disorder, and that made them 5.7 times more likely than their peers, right? Than they're like just normal kids without gender dysphoria. Eating disorders, they were 3.2 times more likely. Psychoses, they were 14.4 times more likely. Like children, this is age 10 to 17, this group. Like these, like you're not supposed to have psychoses at that age. Like nobody should, but like it's incredibly rare to have that with at that age. So to have psychoses, like it's only 4.9% of them, but it's 14.4 times more likely than their peers, right? So like there's something terribly wrong here. Personality disorders, they're 7.9 times more likely. Schizophrenia, 32.6 times more likely. Like I said about psychoses, right? You're not supposed to have schizophrenia as a 16-year-old, right?
Mm-mm.
It typically happens later as an adult when your health declines further, right? And that made them, sorry, uh, anyway, self-inflicted injuries, 8.7 times more likely than their peers.
Ah,
Substance use disorders, 3.3 times more likely. Suicidal ideation, 11 times more likely, right? So, like, it's just, like, it's tragic. And, you can make the argument here, just stopping here when we're talking about mental illness, that perhaps they have higher rates of mental illness because they are discriminated against, because they're bullied, right? It's tough being transgender in a cisgender world. And I have a lot of sympathy for that aspect of it. But like the degree of the difference, it just doesn't make sense. And I kind of pile onto that argument with there are a few other studies in this group, but I'll just talk about one more, and that is just to show that it's not just mental illnesses, right? That could make sense, right? If somebody's bullied a lot and they have
yeah.
more mental illnesses, that makes sense. But if somebody has more asthma, fibromyalgia, like I just don't think that discrimination and transphobia really explains that very well. So asthma, this is looking at a group of a very large group of people with who are transgender Medicare beneficiaries compared to just cisgender Medicare beneficiaries, right? So it looked at a lot of them, 7,454 transgender Medicare beneficiaries compared to 39 million cisgender. So it's a very big study, and they have a lot of data to work with. And the other thing to keep in mind here is that the transgender group, just because gender dysphoria and being non-binary and transgender is more common in young folks, their average age was actually 18 years younger than the average age of the cisgender group. So if I asked you, Emily, like who do you think would have better health, the younger group or the older group?
The younger.
You would expect the younger group, a group that's 18 years younger on average, you would expect their health to be much better. But in so many ways, it's not. So asthma was 30% compared to 14%. Autism was 3% compared to 0.3%, so it's a tenfold increase. Obstructive pulmonary disease, 27 compared to 21%. Hepatitis, 8.6 compared to 1.7%. Schizophrenia, we already talked about that, 27 to 5.6. Depression disorders, 67% compared to only 22%. Anxiety disorders, 62% compared to 20%. And I'll just get back to the physical ones. Epilepsy, right? 11% compared to 3.3%.
Wow.
Like, why? Why? Fibromyalgia, 37% compared to 21%. Migraine, 15% compared to 4.4%. Obesity, 31% compared to 17%. Non-hepatitis liver conditions, 12% compared to 7.3%. Why would a group of people who are 18 years younger on average have worse health than a control group of people? Like it just doesn't make sense. And just to show you that I wasn't cherry picking like this one study I found, the authors say in the conclusion, they say, quote, "These findings, while striking, align with what has been reported in much of the previous literature on transgender patients." End quote. So that it's a common trend, and they're aware of this. They're aware that for whatever reason, people with gender dysphoria, they suffer with really high rates of not just mental illness, but physical illness. And I mean, a last small example, right? Looking at 453 males who ended up having gender dysphoria later in life, 33% of them had cryptorchidism, which is undescended testicles at birth, right? So it's basically testosterone is what kind of helps the testes descend. And so 33% of these men who ended up being gender dysphoric later in life, looking back, they had cryptorchidism. And it's somewhat common in the normal population, but it's only 2 to 4% in the normal population, right? So like how does bullying and discrimination and transphobia play into that? I can't give a good answer. And so basically I just put forth my own hypothesis that that physical health is the real issue here, and that for whatever reason their bodies are not functioning as they should. And I think that a lack of oxygen is a far, far better explanation for why their bodies, and particularly their brains, because the brain is exceptionally sensitive to hypoxia. I think that is why they are suffering the way that they are. And I mean, there's so much like research coming out on this, but like time and time again, the scientists they're just like, they keep on hammering this point that is because of discrimination and transphobia. They're like they just like say it as if we all know it's because of this. And it's just I think it's tragic. I think it's a lie, and it just perverts the truth. And I might seem insensitive to say that that it's not because of bullying. But maybe perhaps like a certain amount of the disparity is, but to keep on going on that it's all discrimination and transphobia, it impedes us from actually figuring out what's really going on. And that's what I want to do with the book. I want to figure out what's actually going on. Why are these people suffering so horribly with like every type of illness, right?
Well, exactly. And we're doing an injustice to that population for us to just sweep them under our wing and just go, oh, you were just
Hmm.
bullied. It's okay. Just sit here and continue to suffer in physical illness.
Yeah.
We're going to pretend that it's something else. Like, no, we're saying this not to shame them, but to highlight that this is actually a physical component to this and to get them help. Like,
Yeah.
they need help, not to have an agenda for there to be no, gender dysphoria, that we want
Hmm.
to rid the world of all transgenders. No,
Exactly.
we want to rid the world of physical illness.
Like I mentioned this in the book, like if somebody got healthy and their depression went away, they're no longer suicidal, they had more energy, had more vitality, like and they still wanted to express themselves as a different gender, I'd be so happy for them.
Yeah,
Like I couldn't, I personally, I
knock
couldn't
yourself
care less
out.
about it. It's just like, but like if a loved one of mine was depressed and anxious and suicidal and fatigued all the time, and they just had no energy, and they were visibly pale, if I could see it on them and I could look at them and see that they were so pale and that they bruise so easily and that they clearly have anemia, like I would be a coward to just trumpet the narrative that, oh, it's just because of discrimination, transphobia. Like it's just it's a real shame.
It really is. And I'm so like, you actually are like a justice warrior in that, but not
Yeah.
the way that you started out. Like,
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
you know what I mean? Like you're really doing this for the gender dysphoric population. You know what I mean? To let them know that like,
Yeah.
hey, there might be another reason.
Yeah, it, that's such a good observation. Like I've never thought of it that way.
Well,
It's
because
it's
you're
almost
doing this.
completely different, but in
Yeah.
all the right ways. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're doing this number one because I believe that it was divine. I think that it was just a gift that you were given eyes to see the pattern. And once you saw the connections, then you were given this beautiful brain that could, go find all this research and to actually put this in a book form. Like that's a big leap to go from just I have this idea to writing a very, very detailed book like this. And it's not lost on me that that is just absolutely a divine appointment.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Emily. Uh, yeah, it was like definitely the hardest thing I've done to make the book. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah.
and you I don't know how you felt, but you may have felt kind of like obsessed, like not obsessed in like a bad way, but just driven, like just
Hmm.
excited
Yeah.
about watching all of this. Like I'm sure it was kind of like a creation, like giving birth to something.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like obsessed in a way, and I really had to get it out. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
That's awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for writing this book. I'm gonna scream it from the rooftops.
Hmm.
And I think it is. I am a, social justice warrior in that I want to protect this population that's really getting the short end of the stick with this uh quick answer that it's just because you were bullied.
Hmm.
It's just because you were bullied. It's okay.
Hmm.
No, like check their physical health. Like let's really look into this.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to like we're so like cerebral about it. We act as if like, our issues couldn't possibly be like we're humans. We're not animals. Like our issues couldn't possibly be because of a lack of nutrition or a lack of oxygen, something so basic and fundamental. Like it must be because of these complex psychological problems. And like we have to be more humble than that and realize like you can't have these higher order brain processes without the more primal ones, right? And so like you need the bases, you need oxygen, you need blood. They're very basic things, but you need those so desperately, right? It's obvious. Like if you don't breathe, you die. If you bleed out, you die. So if you bleed out and you die, well, what would that look like if you just didn't bleed out enough to die, but you lacked blood? You'd be like kind of you wouldn't be living fully. Like you wouldn't have the vitality. You'd be kind of like I don't mean to say like zombie like, but like kind of zombie like. You'd be you wouldn't be your full self and your full potential.
Absolutely. And I know that you've experienced this whenever you changed your eating. It was like you came online
Hmm.
a little bit more or a lot more. And that was for me. I literally for the first 40 years of my life, I just thought that I was stupid. Like I just thought, well, this is just me until all of a sudden all the connections started working.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, I'm brilliant. Like
Yeah.
I had no clue, but it was just that I was malnourished for the first
Yeah.
40
Yeah.
years of my life.
Yeah. It's so unfortunate. Like yeah, like your brain works so much better when it gets what it needs, and like I'm so thankful for that. Like not only am I more calm and less anxious, but like my brain just like it works better, and I'm so thankful that like it just like it almost like just it used to feel like sticky or something. I don't know. It just like didn't work as well. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, Mine was the way that I described it was mental clarity. It
Hmm.
was just like before that was just like this, like how they say brain fog.
Yep. Yep.
It was just like this brain fog where it was just like I was like, why did I come in the room? I forgot, and then I'm
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, I gotta answer this phone call or yeah, I gotta do this. And now it's just like boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
Like I just do things and it's a flow that just happens. And I don't have to like work at it. It just is the way that my brain, like I said, it just connects.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, anything else that we missed? Because this is just such an interesting conversation. I love it.
Well, I think we covered quite a bit. Like, I know I haven't talked about exactly how I see anemia playing into like how exactly gender dysphoria manifests, but I mean you can read the book for that. Um, and I never mentioned like how like we know that anemia causes mental illnesses, right? There's also a big problem with how we measure anemia, and I talk about that in the book. Um, but yeah, there's lots more in the book for anybody listening, and I'd really appreciate it if they bought the book and if they enjoyed this, and that they would support it because I don't have any like anybody marketing for me or anything, so I guess I got to do it myself. But I really do think it's a good book and it's very interesting, and that anybody who is interested in this topic will really enjoy it and learn a lot. And I'd also just encourage people, like, if you don't believe me, just like look at my website, and I've compiled, like I was talking about with the dating apps, I compiled hundreds of photos, and I treated it as an experiment. Every time I saw somebody who declared that they were transgender or non-binary or whatever, I just took a snapshot, and you can look at the photos yourself. I didn't pick, only the ones I thought looked pale. I just and you, if you look with your eyes, you can see it. You can see that literally, perhaps 99%, but I think it's literally 99% are clearly pale in an anemic way. And, even if it was 50%, that would still be a very significant pattern, right? But it's not 50%. It's nearly all of them. And like, there's something going on here. And I think anemia is the best hypothesis so far. But
Yeah, so if somebody's watching this interview and they can identify with what you're talking about, and definitely go get the book, and we'll put the links below. But what is something that they could do? I mean, obviously eat red meat, but what would you say if somebody just like off the street was like, "You're talking about me"? What would you have
mhm.
their takeaway be?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, red meat would be like the number one instruction. I think it just covers a lot of bases, not only the iron, but all the other ingredients like B12 that you need to produce blood. Just look at red meat. It's pretty much, it looks just like your blood, and that's it's literally true because so many of the ingredients in it are the exact same. So I would definitely make that the top priority. Just eat as much red meat as you can. Um, and I would also avoid plant foods that inhibit the absorption, such as soy and things high in phytates and oxalate, like spinach. And then I would consider, I don't know, I would consider taking iron supplements, but I can't like recommend against it. I would consider it. Some people take iron transfusions, and you can notice the difference in their skin tone before and after the iron transfusion. They take before and after pictures. And then, I mean, some people, their problem is that they just lose a lot of blood either from menstruation or like a GI bleed. And so, like, you would obviously need to get that figured out as well. Um, so, yeah, there can be many different causes, but the big one is just iron deficiency.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I am going to, like I said, put those links in the show notes. Would you like people to reach out to you? If they like see our interview and they like have a question or they read your book?
Yeah, please. I think you can reach out to me on my website
Oh,
through the
perfect.
contact thing, and I might have my email there. Um, but I'm not really on much social media right now. Um, I have like a YouTube channel, but like no followers.
Yeah,
But
yeah. We'll make that better.
but yeah. So yeah, I'm hoping to get this message out there more, and like that's why I'm so thankful to you, Emily, for having me on. Like you're the first person who's been willing to have me on about this. Like, I mean, I I think because like I have no accolades to speak of. I'm not a research scientist, and it's also about a very controversial topic. So I really do appreciate you having me on to talk about this.
Oh, no problem. I was, so intrigued. Whenever you told me you wrote a book, I was like, what? I was like, go, Brendan. Like, I was so impressed that you wrote a book. And then whenever I got it, and of course, I'm, very pale. And then whenever I really started looking at the correlations with the mental illness, I was like, oh, this is like right up my alley. Like, I want to know more about this.
Mhm.
No, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had.
Thank you. Yeah,
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Brendan, and I'll put all that in the show notes. And just thank you so much for, really doing the work to really put it in a way that we can understand.
it's my pleasure.
All right. Bye.
Bye.